Hello and welcome to another episode of The Word for Kids. I'm Jamie and I'm guiding you through the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel in a series of 20 episodes. Last time we learned about Samuel anointing David as the new king. Jesse passed each of his sons before Samuel, and the Lord did not choose any of them. When Samuel asked if there was another son, Jesse sent for David, who was out in the field with the sheep. When he passed before Samuel, God chose him as king, and Samuel anointed him. From that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. Meanwhile, the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and instead an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. He called for someone to play the lyre for him to calm his spirit, and it just so happened that David played the lyre beautifully. So David entered Saul's service and would play for Saul to make him feel better. And that's where we left off last time. Are you ready for today's adventure? Let's go! So the Philistines got ready for war, and so did the Israelites. They each occupied one hill, and there was a valley between them. There was a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, who came out of the Philistine camp. He was about 9 feet 9 inches tall. He had a lot of heavy and strong bronze armor, a javelin, which is like a spear, and someone held a shield in front of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." On hearing Goliath's words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days, the Philistine Goliath came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now, Jesse told his son David to take roasted grain and 10 loaves of bread for his brothers, as well as 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. He was to see how his brothers were doing and report back to his father. Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up, and set out, as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Whenever the Israelites saw Goliath, they all fled from him in great fear. David asked the man standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine? Who is this that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The man said, "The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him, and he will also give him a daughter in marriage and exempt his family from taxes." When David's older brother heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger. He and his brother got into an argument. What David said was overheard, and eventually Saul sent for David. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he is a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "I have been keeping my father's sheep. I have killed lions and bears who have come after the sheep. The Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine." So Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Saul put his tunic, which is like a robe, on David. Then he put a full coat of armor with a bronze helmet on him, and David fastened the sword over the tunic and tried to walk around. But he said, "I cannot go in these, because I'm not used to them." Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and, with his sling in his hand, approached Goliath the Philistine. He said to David, who was so small compared to him, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And he cursed David by his gods. David said to him, "You come against me with the sword and the spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. The battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." Goliath kept coming closer to him, but David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over Goliath with just a sling and a stone. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of Goliath's sword and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw their hero was dead, they turned and ran. And that's where our story ends for today. It's time for the verse to remember. Today's verse is 1 Timothy 4:12. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. One more time. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. 1 Timothy 4:12. Let's pause right there for today's word of the day.
Hey kids, Eugene the Turtle here with another word of the day. Today's word is faith. Faith is having confidence in something we hope for, even when we can't see it. Faith.
Today's story is probably one you've heard before. The famous story of David and Goliath. One reason this story is so popular is because people love to hear stories about an underdog overcoming something seemingly impossible. Just like we talked about last time, God often chooses people whom the world would say are underdogs. But let's look at David's attitude compared to his brothers and the other soldiers. They were so afraid they weren't willing to risk fighting a giant. David, however, was brave. He knew the Lord was on his side. He knew the Lord would be with him and would help him defeat this mighty warrior. He didn't even need all that fancy armor and the weapons available to him. To the rest of the Israelites and to the Philistines, he probably looked like a fool, and he was most certainly the underdog in the situation. But just like he often does, God used the underdog, David, to bring about a major change for the Israelites. The Philistines, who had just been arrogant and boastful, were running in fear, and the Israelites, who had just been trembling in fear, suddenly found themselves in a much better situation. Just a few minutes of great boldness and faith from the little guy in the story brought about a major change. Think about your own life and what opportunities you may have to be bold and show great faith, even if you feel like an underdog. And then go out and be brave. To be clear, I'm certainly not telling you to sling rocks at anybody else. That's all the time we have for this episode. I can't wait to see you again soon for another episode of The Word for Kids.